Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hey everybody, it's me, your host, Joe Slepsky. Welcome back to Joe on Joe, the open podcast where I've covered every episode of G.I. Joe, the Sunbow cartoon, the DIC, even Extreme, and every issue of the Marvel Real American Hero comic book, page by page, panel by panel, which is relevant today. Because this week is another edition of You on Joe, where you, the G.I. Joe fan, whatever it is about G.I. Joe that you absolutely love, the comic books, the ephemera, the action figures, it is all on the table for discussion. Whatever it is you want to talk about, you are the star of the show. So if you want to participate and be a guest, please reach out on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Joe on Joe Pod, or you can send an email to me at joeonjoepod@gmail.com and let me know what topic you'd like to cover. The more specific, the better. But we will get into it. And while you're online, please give me a rate and review on your podcast app. Every review helps grow the show. Or if you're inclined, please visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/JoeandJoePod and help keep the show afloat that way. And while you're at it, please keep our wonderful sponsors, the Movies in a Meal podcast, in your thoughts. In the beginning of time, the smallest organism gained sentience and thought to itself, I really need a good meal. Then, a bunch of other stuff happened, and finally the Lumiere brothers started showing movies in France. This was all the inspiration that fellow broadcasters Brad, Keith, and Ben needed to combine these two primal needs into the Movies in a Meal podcast. The Movies in a Meal is one of the most casual and relaxing film talk podcasts you could ever listen to. These three friends enjoy a good meal together while talking all about the movies. And not just reviews, they do favorite lists, comparison discussions, genre talks, anything and everything that you can think of. They've even broken their solemn promise inherent in the name and branched out into TV talk. So I love the variety of films they bring to the table. They cover new releases, classics, cult films, often in one episode. It's really a delight to listen to, and it has something for every movie fan out there to enjoy. So if you're looking to grow your podcast library, if you eat meals, and if you've ever seen a movie, then you should give Ben, Keith, and Brad a listen and subscribe to the Movies in a Meal podcast. They've been a great sponsor to this show. I love the Movies in a Meal podcast, and I'd like all of you to love them too. Now, last week we discussed Snake Eyes, so this week it makes sense to follow up that conversation with more ninjas. The revelation that Zartan assassinated the Hard Master. My guest this week is John Cooper, owner of The Treasures Unknown, an online collectible shop specializing in 70s and 80s toys and memorabilia. They just had a massive G.I. Joe auction and still have all kinds of great stuff on their eBay page. Now find John at The Treasures Unknown on social media. You will absolutely see something that you need in your collection. I know that I did. And John wanted to talk about the mind-blowing revelation that Zartan, of all people, was involved in that ninja drama. That means it's really all about a Real American Hero 45 today. That's what we're talking about. It was revealed that Zartan was the one who impersonated Storm Shadow, and that way back in issue number 27, Storm Shadow was not lying to Snake Eyes when he said that he didn't kill his uncle. Spoiler alert, I guess, maybe. Spoilers? 40, 35 years old. Together we break down issue number 45. The absolute masterful pacing of it, the way that Larry Hama took his time with the revelations, literally over the course of years, making us savor them as part of the ongoing saga. It wasn't just an event book. It is just the best era of G.I. Joe comic books, and I was really happy to discuss them again with John. So please enjoy our talk of Zartan, ninjas, and murder.
Just odd that it feels odd for me to be being interviewed about G.I. Joes on a podcast.
Listen, that's the thing about this show, John Cooper, is that G.I. Joe is universal. Even if you're not someone who absolutely grew up rabid with it, you're aware of it. It's influenced. It's somehow come into your life. You've seen it. And what I always like to say to my guests, maybe such as yourselves, but, a lot of times maybe there's some younger folks that come on here, is everyone was into something when they were 10 years old. Everyone, so that love for that thing that you were into, whatever that thing is, that's the same kind of love that people have for G.I. Joe, so that's that common thread that really binds us. So if G.I. Joe wasn't your super jam, which you are a fan, and we are going to be talking about a Zartan
Yeah, when I was a kid, that was there was nothing else to me.
Yeah.
It was it. I mean, I loved. Well, you can talk about it, but it's like I
Yeah.
loved everything He-Man, Star Wars, but GI Joe was that was the one thing that it just resonated
So
with me.
cool. So cool. And a comic book, cartoon, the toy, like what was it? What touched you most?
The comic book.
Yeah.
You know, I love the cartoon. I used to watch it religiously, but it was campy, and that was the appeal of it.
Hmm.
It's, you know, when you see Storm Shadow fighting Quick Kick in the middle of the blizzard, and Quick Kick's got no clothes on except for his pants and a sash, and then he beat, I don't know if you would say he beats Storm Shadow, but it's like Storm Shadow was the quintessential ninja, and in the 80s growing up for me, ninjas were above all else. I think
Oh,
my first, oh,
nothing bigger than ninjas in the
correct.
80s. Absolutely nothing bigger. Set
I
aside
had a
G.I. Joe. Ninjas were everywhere in the 80s. We were fascinated with ninjas. Ninjas could do no wrong.
Yeah, my friend Patrick, he and I were going to train to be ninjas, so we were reading black belt magazine. I remember hanging from, to improve my grip strength, I'd hang from trees and like, try
Sure.
to
Oh,
grip built
well,
up.
between ninja grip strength and Luke Skywalker grip strength from Return of the Jedi flipping himself,
Yep.
grip strength was key when you were a kid. You were like, how
And I
can I
thought
get my fingers to hold on to something narrow?
I thought it would be a much bigger part of my adult life than it has been based on childhood
Well, that and quicksand, we all
and
know.
quick.
Yeah, that and
Yeah.
quicksand, ninjas and quicksand. We used to make the paper stars that ninjas would throw.
Oh, I did. I would order the actual
Oh,
stars.
you
Like
an actual?
we had stars. There was a guy that where I grew up in New Mexico, a couple houses down from my grandmother's. He made a katana in metal shop,
Oh,
and he showed it to me, and I think he sold it to me for $80 or something. And
wow.
I was let's see, maybe 12 or 13.
Jesus.
And I remember being up on the irrigation ditch behind my house, like,
Yeah,
slicing,
yeah.
because I was going to be a ninja. I was convinced.
There's a fabulous South Park episode that you just described. They all get ninja weapons and they proceed to murder each other. Yeah, that's exactly it. Like they do exactly what you described, and then they take it to
And
the
then
South Park
take
level.
it to
Yeah.
the next
Yeah,
level.
yeah, yeah. I think Kenny gets a shuriken in the eye and all that. Yeah.
But to kind of to bring it back, so I enjoyed the cartoon, but I don't feel they did the characters justice
Mm-hmm.
in the way that the comic book did. The comic book was the only comic book I have ever had a subscription to
Yep.
that I used to get in the mail in the brown paper sleeve, and I would read it in 10 minutes and then have to wait an entire month for the next one.
Yep.
And just issue, the silent interlude issue, where they reveal that Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow both have the same tattoo, was like, oh my God, they're
Were,
what is
were you reading it concurrently when that came out, or did you get that as a back issue?
concurrently.
Oh, wow.
I think I started reading in issue 2 is when
Holy
and
cow.
I didn't
Yeah.
have a subscription at that point, but
Mhm.
I remember picking up issue 2, but issue back then it was like it was more military, like
Yeah.
actual military, and
Right.
then it kind of, as it progressed on, you started getting into these kind of more elaborate characters, and
Right.
man, I was hooked. And then then the character or the figures came out, and you had figures that related to the comic book, and you could, they had real names other than their code names, and they had whole backstory. Like the marketing was genius for that, and it sucked me in.
That's great. That's great. So when you first encountered so you were reading concurrently. So if you're
Yes.
you're then reading it, you fell in love with Snake Eyes. Obviously, the silent
Oh,
issue
of
blows
course.
you away. 5 months later, the Snake Eyes origin books land in your mailbox.
It
26 and 27.
it was like I must have read those 100 times each, if that was
You
possible.
you were looking for clues. You were like, okay, there's a mystery here. We need to solve this.
Correct. And I think those issues were the first time I'd heard the word LRRP, or
Hmm.
the acronym,
Long
long
range
range
recon
recon
patrol.
patrol.
Yep.
And I remember telling friends at school, and they're like, "What's alert?" And I'm like,
If you
"Morons."
don't know, you don't know.
Excuse me. So yeah, it was. I mean, it was just amazing, and the writing was so. I don't know. The writing just touched me
Well,
in a way that no other book did.
it was easy. It was easy. Larry writes very clearly, but also he doesn't pander. So it was giving
Yes.
us a an elevated. It's something to reach for, like you say,
Hmm.
the LERP stuff. Yes, they wrote the long range recon patrol in their in the editor's notes, but that was in there once,
Uh-huh.
and then it was used again and again and again. So if you forgot it, you'd have to go back and read it.
Yep.
He would use words like enfilade, and maybe they explained it once, but otherwise you'd have to go to a dictionary and look it up.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
he used real military terms and didn't pander. He just told the story, and it I think just broad brushing children's entertainment. I think that was a key difference between a lot of the stuff that we came up with versus a
Right.
lot of the
Yeah.
stuff that's quote geared towards kids these days. Is that it's more towards meeting them where they are instead of meeting them a little bit where they want to be.
Yeah. Which is what the cartoon, I think, did. Is it met them where they are,
Right.
and it kind of. I love the cartoon. Don't get me wrong. It's cheesy and in all the good ways, but the comic book was just like, it felt like I was
Oh
reading like
yeah.
a Matt Nolan novel or something.
Yeah, I mean the comic, absolutely the cartoon was, I mean literally the animated version, and then the comic book was like the real life tales of them. So
Yes.
you understood that they could be telling different stories of the same people, but it was like, oh, this is the more real gritty version.
Yeah.
And then imagine had they come out with a live action movie at the time, it would have
Oh,
been that third tier of, and then there's the adult like there's
yeah.
the PG-13 version for me. Here's the
Yeah.
13 to 15-year-old version, and then. Here's the 9 to 12-year-old version.
Yeah.
Although I
I
will
would
say
love.
this, earlier you
Okay.
mentioned Quick Kick and and finding in the snow in his feet. In the comic book, there's famously, I think Cobra's invading Fort Knox, and
Uh-huh.
there's Torpedo running around Fort Knox in his full torpedo suit with his flippers on.
And I guarantee you, not once did any of us as kids go, "Well, that's weird."
No,
You're
we
like, "It's
didn't.
Torpedo. Of course he's going to run around."
No, no, we didn't. So they both have their moments. I'm just going to say
Yeah.
that they both have their
Yep.
moments of what on brand.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. So you get the secret origin of Snake Eyes,
Uh-huh.
and in telling that, they also basically tell you the secret origin of Tommy. They're intertwined.
Yes.
and
Correct.
and you spend an issue and a half going, this is why they hate each other, because
Yeah.
he loved his family and then he murdered him, blah blah blah, all that stuff. And then on the last page you get a mic drop of, I didn't do it.
Yep. Exactly.
Oh,
And then it was, I mean, obviously there's well, you're lying, but it's like, if you didn't, then who did it?
right. Yeah, that's just such a great way to plot it. A wonderful way to tell that kind of ongoing mystery.
Yeah.
You lead someone right up to the moment, and then you pull the rug out from under them.
And what I love, and it didn't occur to me until you said issue 45, but that you go from 26, 27 to 45
Mm-hmm.
before the reveal, which it seems like that just wouldn't happen in today's, like
No.
it would be much faster than that.
The whole thing would have been a 6-issue arc.
Yeah.
So they could wrap it up in a tidy
Yep.
little trade paperback and sell it to everybody.
Yep.
No, they were made different. There was a rhythm to his A plots and B plots and C plots.
And it was like a novel, because you'd have, here's this story, and then, we're going to go talk about this story for
Yeah.
a while, and then touch back on the original story, and then come up with it.
right. It was, yeah, exactly
different
right. It
story
was
line.
literally an equation, where you got, of the 22 pages, whatever the number would be, you'd get 12 to the main story, 6 or 8 to the B plot, and then 2 or 4 to the C plot. And then the next issue, the C plot moves up to the B plot,
Yep.
and the B plot becomes the A plot, and so on and so forth. And it's a rotating cycle, which for comic books is absolutely perfect. It keeps you coming
Yeah.
back every month. And then occasionally you get a one shot, which is, which will just kind of cleanse the palate for you and kind of do a reset. And in this, yeah, and in this case, we had this simmering subplot of the totally unassuming, completely harmless looking, although we knew better just from his appearances, taking the kid's gun in Snake Eyes, but the soft master traveling through Springfield and on the hunt. That was just this C plot that would march through these books and be like, what is happening here? What is he leading up to? When is this going to come to a conclusion?
And your palate cleanser, the first thing I thought of an issue that was a palate cleanser for me, and I will even put this either on par with 26, 27, or even above it as one of my favorite issues, was the issue with Wild Weasel and Ace.
Oh, 35. Absolutely.
And the dogfight, action was great. But at the end, when they both just kind of give each other the
salute,
hey,
yep,
good job, and then they went their ways. I remember reading that thinking, that's how enemies, it's like Storm Shadow and Snake Eye, or so if you think of the cartoon,
in the cartoon, absolutely, and in the
Storm
cartoon
Shadow
it was more
and
spirit, right?
Yeah,
because they always the cartoon always, which was a shame, always struggled with Snake Eyes because he was mute. They didn't know what to do with him.
Yeah.
But you're totally right. Yeah, spirit. Specifically, I'm thinking of the Satellite Down issue, the episode when Spirit and Storm Shadow go at it. They're trying.
Is that where they're in the cave?
Yeah, and they're trying to go at it.
The mass device or whatever it was.
Oh no, that's the mass device was different. But I mean, it showed up a lot whenever they would have Storm Shadow.
Oh, okay, yeah, you're right. I think that was another time where Storm Shadow had ended up giving him the device, the piece of the device that he.
Yeah.
So
and they did that, and they did that a lot with Storm Shadow to kind of let you know that he had some. It's funny, they took the battlefield honor, we'll say, that Destro showed in the comic books, and they gave in the cartoon they gave that to Storm Shadow, and in the cartoon Destro, while not as much of a kind of a jerk as Cobra Commander, he didn't. He was pretty into it, and in the books he was always a little distanced from it. He was always like, well, we'll do it if it suits my needs. And in the cartoon he's like, yeah, let's do it, let's grow giant vines, let's kill the Joes, blah blah blah.
And I'm sure this is talked at nauseum in the world, but when they changed the intro song from Cobra and Destro to Cobra the Enemy, and it was just that slight difference that because I think, and maybe you agree that Destro was highest bidder.
Oh yeah. Listen, listeners, as we covered extensively on the previous week's Frost Destro interview that we heard, we unearthed a lost tape of David Frost sitting down with Destro himself, and it was a fabulous interview. And
just last week?
It was just last week.
Okay.
And, yeah. Oh yeah. It was an actual interview. I say that with tongue in cheek, and it's David. Give it a listen. It's fun, and it's David Frost sitting down with Destro. We talk all about this stuff, and that kind of honor is great, and it makes it great. It makes great for great character moments in telling all these stories, because then characters don't necessarily act as one may first expect them to. They have a chance to surprise you and a chance to whatever, and then you do get the characters like. You need the characters like Cobra Commander that are always just going to be, just I'm a weasel and I'm this, but then you got a guy that can come in and pivot and take the story elsewhere. So good. And the issue before 45 also was a palate cleanser, which if I'm reading it concurrently, you're like, that's going from 0 to 60, and 45 was like Airtight and Lady J intro, and and they're fighting these spores, and it's a fun adventure. But then the next month, all of a sudden, with no preparation, not even a cover warning, it's not even like, oh, ninjas in this issue. It's straight up, oh yeah, you remember Softmaster was running around figuring stuff out, here's the killer. And
it's this. So even and I think I haven't mentioned it before, but in our previous conversations, I don't collect very much, but the one thing I do want to collect is I want to go get all the back issues of,
Yeah,
not necessarily all the back issues, but that chunk of my childhood, basically, that,
totally. Well,
that I read
they've
because it was
yeah,
just,
they've been collected a couple times over the years. There's nothing currently in print.
yeah,
I know Skybound recently got the rights to do
yeah, aren't they,
to
I
do
heard you were
GI Joe.
talking about
My
something.
hope is that they do one of those thick ass omnibuses, and give us like 50 issues at a clip. So like you
I
get
would love that.
three, because that's the other problem too, is every time they've been collected by all of these companies, they've been in such small units that they
Mhm.
never sustain getting to the end of the run in one. Like I think the first time I think there may be one set of trades that maybe Marvel put out years ago that actually,
Yeah.
if you get them all, you can have all of them in trade. But like, if they muscle through and in quick succession, release 350 issue trades, and then make it four, and include, and stretch it, include the annuals, include the order of battles, include the special missions,
Order of
basically all the
battle.
Marvel stuff. So you get
Yep.
four giant thick omnibuy out of it. Actually, someone told me once, I guess omnibus is not a Greek root, so it's not
Okay.
omnibuy. It actually is omnibuses, which is really funny to say.
On the
Yeah,
buses.
but so you get, what I mean? So, but you get them, you release them once, they're out there, they'll go up in
Uh,
value a little bit, but it gives all of us people like yourself.
yeah.
I'll certainly buy. I've got a full collection, but I'll totally buy those omnibuses.
Yep.
And then you finally get them all, because it's the later issues that so many people have trouble tracking down, because they're absolutely hard to get in collected form.
Yeah. And I did try, I went back a few years ago and I read issues one, I think 1 through 5 or something. And they weren't quite what I remember them to be, because they were more militaristic, like actual
Mm-hmm.
military.
Mm-hmm.
And which, that's fine. But, when I'm thinking back to that period of childhood, it's like, this is what I remember.
Yeah.
And, you got to get a few issues to get back into that.
Yeah. Well, the line itself changed. So it's 82 and
Yes.
83 were the real,
Oh,
real
yeah.
military ones.
Yep.
And in 83, they introduced, the open shirt Destros of the world,
Yep.
and,
Yep.
and a couple other figures that weren't necessary. I think Mutt and Junkyard, so they were
Yep.
military, but they were a little different. And then you get to 84, 85, and it's open season on looking amazing and being different, and not everyone being in camo and not everyone being in
Two best
greens.
years of that line.
Yeah, that's right. So it took them a couple years to find it too. So I'm not surprised. And obviously the comics are going to reflect that.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. And the other interesting thing about G.I. Joe 45 is, we talked about A, B, and C plots. The Softmaster is the B plot. It's not even the main plot.
Oh yeah, you're right.
The
Yeah.
the A plot is Ripcord. The issue itself is called In Search of Candy. It's Ripcord going to get his girlfriend Candy. He thinks she's being held captive on Cobra Island, so he
Totally forgot about that.
yeah, so he inserts himself. Now those storylines collide when Zartan gets involved. But it's just a slow burn
Uh-huh.
over the course of this issue as the two storylines kind of merge. Larry keeps checking in with, first Snake Eyes gets this coded message from Softmaster. Then he goes to see Storm Shadow. It's real quick where they're like, "Are we going to go throw down?" And it's like right away that's nipped in the bud. Snake Eyes is like, dude, here's what's up. And he gives him a slip of paper because, again, while yes, technically I know we've seen him use sign language, he never uses sign language, John. He never
Yeah.
they never, in the cartoon, in the comic book, they always find a reason to not have him just sign.
Right.
When the people around him would absolutely, like Storm Shadow 100% would know sign language. Scarlet would
And
know sign.
if you had asked me, has he ever used sign language, I would have 100% say, oh yeah, he uses it all the time. But now that you mention that, it's like,
Not all the time. They've
I don't-
shown it occasionally, but most of the time he's handing slips of paper to people or just kind of nodding his head, and people are guessing
right.
what Snake Eyes means. It's
you're
awesome.
right.
And I say this, I love Snake Eyes. It's,
Yeah.
he's amazing.
Yep.
So then they go, all right, well, we got to go get, they don't tell the reader who it is, but they're like, okay, we're going to team up. And then they give you a little bit of a recap of the whole story in case you forgot, because it was 2 years earlier,
Yep. Yeah.
and a lot happens, in this, when you're a kid, you're that age, 2 years is
Oh,
literally
that's a lifetime.
1/6 of your entire life.
Yeah.
So if you're not rereading these all the time, you get this and you got to go, oh yeah, that's right. Because
Yep.
you leave with the imprint of going, Storm Shadow killed him. That's why Snake Eyes hates him. But then
Yep.
you go, wait a minute. he denied he did it, and they left it as a loose thread, Although if there was a 10-year-old that used the word loose thread, I'd be like,
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was
what
me.
yeah. Where your parents schooling you, kid? Loose threads? You're 10.
Yeah.
But it works so well on a comic book of keeping you coming back month after month. They steal a Rattler, and they had to, and while they're flying there, we get all these check-ins with, we get the C-plot check-in with Hawk getting his general stars and things like that. The progress proceeds certainly with Zartan tracking down.
Could you argue
Ripcord.
then your B plot is actually your A plot, but they're letting you believe that the A plot is the Ripcord plot?
No, because the Ripcord story.
It's been so long. Like I
hear you. I hear you. Well, I think I love that they merge, and that's when he's at his best is when they do merge, when they're totally disparate, and he's jumping from this corner of the world. Oh yeah, we had guys working in Alaska too, and we had guys, and it's just literally checking in on them. That's the most kind of juggly of not combining them. This is the perfect example of him saying, "Oh no, you don't realize this is all connected." And we have been following Ripcord's adventure because we were invested in Ripcord actually. His Candy, his girlfriend Candy, she had been introduced as Bonga the Balloon Bear. We all fell in love with her. She was amazing, so on and so forth. So, and we learned her dad was a Crimson Guardsman and all that stuff. So that I think that had just as much prominence in my my attention span. And then all of a sudden it's like the rug's pulled and you go, oh yeah, and guess what? Zartan's the killer.
Ooh.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. And there's even a line about like, I think this is the one where there's a line. It's somewhere in here. There's a line about Zartan saying like, "Oh, I haven't used this in a while," and you're like, "It's the same bow he used." Yeah. There's a nice split screen showing that Zartan was dressed as Storm Shadow, and that's why everyone saw Storm Shadow. Like Lair's covering all his bases here.
Wow.
And
now I have to go back and go through this whole storyline again.
It's fabulous. And what's even
most
better,
of this is just I'm trying to remember bits and pieces, but 26, 27 they're just ingrained. But I'm happy to talk about 45 now because now I know exactly where to go.
It's so funny for me. So those are the key issues: 26, 27, and 21, right? Yeah. Everyone adores 21, and I 100% recognize its place in history of comics and how and actually the quality of its storytelling, all that stuff. But as a kid, I was like, I got it. It was special as a kid, but for me, it was 26 and 27.
I'm the same way. I appreciate 21.
Yep.
I love that it was the first, where you see Snake Eyes has the tattoo. And
yep.
It was like that's cool, but.
There's so much meat on the bone in 26, 27. So when I start, you get a little older, start paying attention to pricing and stuff like that, and you see 21 start to go up, and I'm like, what about 26, 27?
Yeah, I agree.
Those books are like, I had to make sure I got first prints. I think I had second prints. I had to make sure I got first prints, because like these are the books, man. And further support the ABC issue is once we get the reveal of he's the killer, that's it. We don't go back to Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. They're still flying to Cobra Island. The story never checks back in with them. It stays on Cobra Island with Zartan and Ripcord going at it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, there's one moment we see them landing, but at that point, it's also really it's into the B plot because now they're crossing paths with Candy's dad. And G.I. Joe is starting their Cobra Island assault too. So like all the C and B, everything's coming together. But as far as those two talking about, the biggest issue of their lives, that's it. They go, holy crap, with Zartan, we get one more panel of Storm Shadow to show, hey, we've landed on the island. And then it's all about Ripcord and Zartan.
Oh yeah, so that does support your A plot, definitely.
And do you remember the last page of that issue?
No, I do not.
Oh, it's Ripcord, or is it Zartan? It's someone looks like Ripcord crawling out of the mud because they had gotten into a hand-to-hand combat situation, and someone crawls out of the mud and says, "Ha, He thought he had the jump on me, but in the end, it was my will and strength that won out. And now I have the perfect opportunity. I can take over this one's identity and infiltrate his headquarters. They'll never know that I'm not one of them, but they don't say which one.
Wow. Okay. But I mean, naturally, you would assume Zartan, but it's not confirmed. You can't confirm that.
Can't confirm it. He's dressed like, he looks like Ripcord.
Because if they're on Cobra Island, you would.
Well, Ripcord
Ripcord
was infiltrating Cobra Island.
Yeah. So
him saying, oh, now I can dress myself up like Zartan. Or in this case, it actually was Zartan saying, I can dress myself up like Ripcord and go back and infiltrate their headquarters. It was such a great move. It's on par with, at the end of 27, Storm Shadow going, I didn't kill him.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you're led up to this point and you're like, oh, this is how the story's going to go. We're going to get oh, no, it's now going to continue into this. Now we're going to move into the subterfuge and someone's going to be impersonating somebody.
Yeah.
It's such a great, great issue. And go
ahead.
No.
I was just going to say, the storyline, and this is kind of a tangent sort of, but the cover art for that, I mean, going from 21, well, maybe not, maybe after, like the cover art just turned into something amazing.
Talking about Mike Zeck.
Every cover was just fantastic.
Yep. That's all Mike Zeck, man. He just did the work of his life. And this is a dude who's really accomplished. He drew the first Punisher miniseries. He's done 1 million covers. He drew that amazing Wolverine scratching his claws on Captain America's shield cover, which is just literally a legendary cover. His work on G.I. Joe is probably my favorite work of his stuff. He did Kraven's Last Hunt, which I think is legend, absolute stellar. But his cover work for G.I. Joe did everything. It did all the heavy lifting. Yep. It sold so many units of this comic book because he just picked the right positions, the right angles, the right shadows, the right moments to feature.
Pre-YouTube, when you have not the clickbait titles, but some of his covers were a bit clickbaity because you were expecting that, or at least I'd see the cover and go, oh my God. And then you're looking through the book for that.
Oh, sure.
Specific thing. And you're not, it wasn't in the spirit of it was in there.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily what you're seeing on the cover.
Yeah.
But it was great.
And I think it also benefited from being a toy line and being such a diverse set of toys that there was another hand driving the need to market this stuff. Right. So, left to its, X-Men, Wolverine's on every cover.
Yep.
Right. But at some point, Hasbro jumps in and says, well, we need you to, at this era it wouldn't have been like Battle Force 2000, but they jump in and say, we need you to feature, Zartan needs to be featured this year. And because we're really pushing him. So now you're going to get a lot of Zartan on the covers. And then the next year you're going to get the next set of people. So maybe it's, Zartan's sibling, Zarana, you know what I mean? So like that works as an extra element of creativity in the stew, where they're saying there's a push to do one thing instead of, a lot of times it's just, okay, we know Snake Eyes sells, so let's get Snake Eyes on every cover, which the end of the line absolutely followed into that. But at this point, it wasn't. It was, you got this great mix. You got the Ace dogfight issue. You got the previous issue was Lady J and Bats, so there's always this highlight of these random characters and wide variety of characters that is appealing to, if you don't love it this month, the next month something's going to be exciting for you.
Sure. Yeah.
Versus towards the end of the line, it was Snake Eyes. And if you get tired of that, then there's not much else to bring you back. So good. This is, this is great. And then that part of the story sat there for a good number of years until they did a little more retconning and said, oh, no, it was really Firefly. And you're like, oh,
yep.
That never, we've covered that on the show. I've never liked that Firefly stuff.
And there was even correct me if I'm wrong on this, but you find out that Zartan is the killer, and then you find out that Snake Eye, well, this was probably before that, but Snake Eyes' parents were killed, or his family was killed in a car crash
Mhm.
that was somehow orchestrated by Cobra Commander.
Well, that's also a later reveal. I believe we learned the Cobra Commander
Okay.
crash stuff first, and then we get the Firefly stuff. But
Well, yeah, the Firefly was
yeah,
definitely
yeah.
down the
So
road.
in 2627, they say that his family was killed by a drunk driver, and that's
Yeah.
you just chalk that up to fate and bad circumstances. And what we later learn is that drunk driver was Cobra Commander's brother, and then Cobra Commander blamed that family for killing his, and then he learned that family
Oh, so I am.
so it was kind of like that. So then he said, well, who's that, what was the deal with that family? Oh, they were going to meet their military son. Oh, I'm gonna go kill their son. Who's their son? Oh, their son's training to be a ninja. Go get him. And so he's like, so listen, as all good despots do, he's like, okay, I'll take that as a challenge. Give me a couple years.
I just hired a ninja.
Yeah. Give me a couple years. I'm gonna send Zartan.
Yeah.
So yes, he then sent Zartan to the Arashikage dojo to assassinate Snake Eyes because he blamed Snake Eyes and his family for his brother's death. Yes, and because remember, Snake was Storm Shadow was imitating Snake Eyes' heartbeat.
Hardmaster was.
Well, yes, I'm sorry. Hardmaster was imitating. Yes, Hardmaster was imitating Snake Eyes' heartbeat. Storm Shadow, we thought, wanted to kill Snake Eyes, but it was really Zartan wanting to kill Snake Eyes.
And I'm going to tell you a little secret here, but during my ninja training with my buddy, we would lay on the ground and we would try to control our heartbeats. So when I read that, it was like, yes, this is so real. Like, I've done that.
Oh yeah. 100%. I used to throw those paper stars all over my basement. There's probably one hidden behind a couch somewhere.
Yeah,
that was it. It was that and Daredevil billy clubs. I used to try. I didn't have like real billy clubs. I would just take sticks and try to get them to bounce.
Yeah. I think I did that.
Yeah.
But Daredevil wasn't a big. I started reading more Marvel superheroes, but like G.I. Joe was just like it had my attention.
Daredevil for me was when I discovered Born Again, which would have been, I think I was maybe 14 or something like that. Okay. So I was like 14 years old going like, oh my God, imagine if you could be Daredevil.
Yeah.
Then I was 25 still throwing Daredevil billy clubs.
And ninja stars.
Yeah. No, I used to set up mirrors and play laser tag with mirrors. I always thought that was fun. So I would set up elaborate mirrors in my basement and then see how many times I could bounce it and hit the laser tag. That was always a good time.
Yeah, my buddy and I worked all summer to save enough money to buy a box of laser tag so we could, and then the summer is over and
Yeah, by the time you earn the money, summer's over. You gotta go back to school and you don't play it. Yeah.
Now I gotta go back to school.
Well, all this conversation, it all revolves around stuff we loved when we were a kid and toys and nostalgia and stuff, which is what you specialize in, John, with your company, The Treasures Unknown.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about The Treasures Unknown. So
Dan, my buddy Dan and I, we have been, we'll call ourselves treasure hunters because we just, and I've been doing it since I was a kid. I used to go to garage sales with my grandmother and, not that I have a sixth sense, but like I just have this ability. I can look at something and go, oh, it feels different. And then I go take it home and it's like, oh, it actually is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
So I would do that growing up. And then I met Dan. Our wives knew each other. So Dan and I became friends probably 20 some years ago and started talking one day about our love because he used to go with his dad to like swap meets and things like that. So then we just kind of compared stories back and forth. Like, hey, I was over at the, Goodwill, or I was at the garage sale and I found this. And, he was kind of the only guy that would actually geek out about that kind of stuff with me. And then we kept talking, well, we should do something together. And years go by. And then Super Bowl Sunday in 2019, we were drinking some whiskey. It was just like, well, are we going to do it or are we just going to keep talking about it? And then the Treasure Unknown was born on that day. And it's still part-time. And I think I want to keep it part-time because I don't ever want to feel like it's a job.
Sure.
And
I do know. I know that feeling. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's not the most lucrative. I mean, it could be, but I enjoy it. It's something that I think Dan and I are looking more in towards retirement, where we can just keep doing this as long as we want.
That's the thing. Yeah, I have got that long game in my head too. I'm more comic book related, but like you've amassed a skill set of knowledge and the ability to discern things.
Yeah.
That yeah, when you get to that retirement age and whatever happens, fixed incomes or what have you, there's your mind is still there, obviously, unless something terrible happens. John, I
Correct.
hope it doesn't happen. But your mind is still there, and you
Yeah.
can still partake in that stuff, and that can absolutely make your
Well,
life so much better. And you're doing it. You're doing something you love. You're
Yeah.
you're sifting through history. Feel like a Belloc in Raiders. Like
Right.
we're traveling through history, Dr. Jones. Like you're holding all this great stuff. I'm on your eBay page right now, and you've just got tremendous stuff. Speaking of Raiders, you've got the Streets of Cairo set up there from back in the day.
Well, so we had Belloc, Solid, and so part of this collection that you alluded to a bit was.
Yes, well, tell us about that, because we that was a little bit before
Okay.
we were on air. So you got a massive collection recently. Tell the listeners what that entailed.
So we stumbled across it. It was dumb luck. We were buying a storage unit. We went to go pick it up, and we actually lost the storage unit and then ended up getting called up on a backup offer because the first person didn't pay.
Wow.
And it was designer purses. So totally nothing, like we were looking at it like we're just going to make some money on this, hopefully. So we get there and there's this huge box truck loading up models and toys, and we joke like, hey, put that in our truck, and didn't think anything of it. Then Dan goes to load the truck, ends up striking a conversation with them. We go downstairs, they show us what's left in their unit, and we buy some toys from them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that conversation led to another friend of mine just passed away, unfortunately. He has a very large collection. Would you be interested? This conversation goes back and forth for 2 months. And we're at a point where it's like, this isn't going to happen, Dan. Like I think either somebody else is going to come in or they just change their mind and they don't want to sell it. We get a call right before New Year's of last year. Hey, can you guys come up and take a look? So we go take a look, and it's a storage unit. It's packed full of stuff.
Wow.
Right-hand side is, maybe it wasn't but it was 90% of the original Mego figures, superheroes in their boxes.
Ooh. Friend of the show, Austin Huff, pay attention.
Yeah. So, so I look over and like, I'm immediately drawn to this, and, we start looking through it. And they said, well, if you take this, you got to take this. And it was 25 boxes packed full of Playmates, Star Trek, 90s. It's not garbage. Like, it's not highly valuable. It's just, they made so much of that era Star Trek stuff.
Right.
And he had everything. He had every figure in all the different lines. So we're like, okay, we'll do that. And we bought that collection, and I found a few G.I. Joe items in there, loose items. And I was a little disappointed because, looking at the vast variety of collection, I thought he would have had more G.I. Joes. So we get a call back. Hey, if you guys want to come to the house now, there's more stuff we'd like you to look at.
Oh boy.
And he sends a single picture of a box full of the G.I. Joe play sets, the mortar unit, the bivouac, all boxed just like at Toys R Us.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, we're interested.
Absolutely.
So we go there, and he's like, yeah, there's some other G.I. Joes in the box over here. So I look in the box. It's not everyone. Almost every redback mail away bagged figure you could find.
Wow.
The Create a Cobra figure with sticker sheet, original, and this is some of the things that were just at auction at Hague's.
Okay.
And that ended yesterday. but two of the 93 convention Jinxes, both the black logo version and the blue logo version. What else?
I mean,
The
on your
Ninja
site,
Biker.
I'm seeing like a mint on card 89 with a countdown, the astronaut.
Yes.
I saw on card ripcord.
So those are the not lesser figures, but those are the figures that didn't go to auction.
Yeah.
They sent out, there was almost a complete, there was a carded Snake Eyes, 80
Nice.
straight arm Snake Eyes.
And were the cards mint?
No, they were in amazing condition.
Nice.
But not quite mint. They had a couple dings. Some were unpunched.
That's huge.
We had so there was almost the full 83 line carded.
Wow.
There was a Storm Shadow, a Firefly, Baroness.
That's amazing. So that's sold through what's the
Hakes Auctions.
Hakes Auction.
They're back
Nice.
east.
Nice. And that just ended. So great timing on the interview, Joe.
Yes, exactly.
You did real good, Joe. Sorry, John, I missed you on that. Well, that's great. So, but you've got a lot of the stuff up on your eBay store. It's Treasures Unknown,
Yes.
and you've got what I dig is you've got a whole bunch of different stuff as well. I saw some like the TV show V, which I was a big fan of. So
And
that's cool. And we met at the Pasadena G.I. Joe show.
Yes.
You were showing some stuff there. That was really nice. And so that's really great. So listeners, you need to go check them out. It's on Instagram. It's at The Treasures Unknown. They've also got a Facebook page and a YouTube channel, all under that name. If you can't find it, then
And we do have
you got real spelling problems.
if anybody wants to see that collection in its entirety, just the G.I. Joe portion, I went through every figure that was in there and it's on our YouTube channel.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
I think it's titled and knowing's half the battle, or is the little tagline on it.
Oh, that's awesome, listeners. So you definitely need to go check that out. And John Cooper, this has been a delight.
I would loved it. Like I mentioned, what do you want to talk to me for?
Because you got your finger on the collector pulse, my friend.
I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest on Joe today.
I appreciate it.
All right. Well, now you know more about G.I. Joe 45, the reveal of Zartan being the killer, and Joeing is half the battle.